Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles. My granddad was Swedish, though he always described himself as Scandinavian. My grandmother, on the other hand, was full-blooded Cherokee and always wore a smile. Granddad played the role of mentor in my life, as my dad, who was in the military, was often away. My mom tragically passed away from cancer when I was 4, shortly after giving birth to a stillborn child, leaving my sister and me to be raised primarily by our grandparents. Granddad owned a farm in southeast Missouri where he grew a variety of crops, including corn and sugarcane. If you were a farmer from the area, you'd know that he was also famous for distilling some of the finest whiskey and bourbon. His name was Jabe, short for Zebediah, and my grandmother was affectionately known as Happy due to her ever-present smile. According to Granddad, he found Happy when she was just a young girl around 12 or 13. She had wandered away from her village and got lost. Resourceful as she was, she managed to trap rabbits and cook them over an open fire while carrying the rabbit skins to use once she found her way home. When Granddad, at nearly 17, came across her, he did the right thing and escorted her back to her village. Her people had separated from the main Cherokee group during the Trail of Tears and settled in a remote area no one else wanted. The story goes that Happy was given to Jeb in exchange for 2 deer per year over 5 years. He honored his part of the deal and Happy became his wife. They later had a church wedding when a church was built in the nearby community. They already had 2 children by then, but what mattered most was that they were happy together. Grandmother was a remarkable woman, and her love for Granddad knew no bounds. She would have given her life for him or for my sister and me without hesitation. One of the things she had learned from the white man's world was how to cook. She could turn almost anything into a delicious meal, and her cornbread was legendary throughout the area as the best around. My sister and I grew up in the country, knowing our dad was away in Vietnam toward the end of the war and later in Desert Storm. Wherever he was, it was never in southeast Missouri with us. We understood that he was still grieving the loss of our mother and was using the military to cope. My parents had married when they were both 17, with Mom 6 months pregnant with my sister. Dad had enlisted to support them, thinking he would be stationed at Fort Leonard Wood, not too far from the farm. The good part was that he finished basic training and was on leave when my sister was born, which led to a big celebration. When my sister was a week old, Dad had to leave for training at a fort in Texas, and when he returned months later, Mom became pregnant with me. Dad wasn't home when I was born as he was stationed in Korea, where he spent almost 2 years. When he came back, they reunited, and soon after Mom was pregnant again. But tragically, it was the pregnancy that cost her life. Dad was struggling, but he knew that my sister and I would be well cared for and raised to be good people by Granddad and Grandma. Southeast Missouri, where we lived, was known for producing hillbillies, or as the locals called themselves, scratchers. These folks could make a living from the land, using the 360 acres of low mountains and forests they had. Back in the 1920s, you could file for 160 acres of land for just a $12 fee, provided you built a house and worked the land. Many people filed for one plot of land, and their spouses would file for the adjoining plot. This is the land where Granddad and Grandma made their home and lived. We didn't have a lot of fields, but we grew enough corn and sugar cane to make ends meet. We even sold some sugar to neighbors. Granddad made his liquor in caves on the property using spring water from the area and took great care to avoid contaminating the creek with his distillation byproducts. He had a deep well where he dumped his leftovers, letting them filter into the earth. I'm sure the local water wells had a unique flavor. We'd fill milk cans with the aged liquor and transport it to Springfield, Branson, Fayetteville, and as far as Kansas City. In those days, no one questioned an old farmer in a beat-up pickup truck with cans of liquor. Selling it was never a problem, and the buyers always wanted more. It was always the same, and Granddad would tell them, "I'll bring more when it tastes the way it should." We had raveneers come to the farm fairly often to poke around all the buildings looking for cooking equipment, but they never found anything that would give away what we sold. We had cows that justified the milk. We sold some of the sugar we made and fed a lot of corn to the hogs and cows. This was a working farm that had a big garden that we canned vegetables and fruit from every summer and fall. We had a lot of apple and pear trees that made great apple butter and some hard cider and vinegar that we kept for ourselves. Grandma loved that apple cider when it had a good kick to it. That smile would just get bigger. If you know anything about Southeast Missouri, you know that those people are 100% rednecks. They'll give you the shirt off their backs, but they don't tolerate city folk, state lawmen, raveneers, or someone who steals from a neighbor. It was amazing how many people just turned up missing and were never heard from again. They disappeared, and even the car they were driving never surfaced. I don't know this to be a fact, but I bet they would find hundreds of cars that were lost over the years if they ever drained the Lake of the Ozarks. The local law was good because they didn't mess with anyone. They harassed the young men who drove too fast, but then they'd let life go on the way it had for several decades if they weren't causing any major trouble. Everyone knew where you could get a drink, and everyone knew where a man could find some comfort, as they called it. There were a couple houses on the outer edge of every small town or village that would have the light on the porch late at night. You could find comfort there if the light was on. No big deal, right? You could get some Saturday night comfort as long as you were at church Sunday morning. One of the things I defy you to find deep in the heart of that redneck country is a hungry family. Neighbors provided the raw materials for a family to eat if they were having a problem. Young men would cut wood for heat and with stoves. Those same young men would kill a couple of extra rabbits when they hunted and take the dressed game to those who were hungry. Chickens would find a way to get to those homes, as well as smoke meats that would show up on porches. Women would get together for blanket quilting and making clothing for the kids. These people took care of each other. I'm sure times are changing even for the folks in the mountains, but I bet they still take care of each other. Granddad was very strict about school. He said that he was glad to have gone to school through the 5th grade to learn to read and write. Grandma had never been to school, but she had learned to read and write. She knew a lot about geography and showed us kids the world through an old Encyclopedia Britannica. We would often spend a night with her reading about some far-off place. She would get the book with the world picture and point to where a place was. Anyway, Granddad made sure that we went to school and that our grades didn't slip. Sis was always fascinated by boys and young men as she grew up. Our grandparents would warn her off the bad ones and didn't harass her about the boys they thought were worthy of her. Sis was a good cook. She could darn a pair of socks with the best of them and could patch a pair of torn pants in a flash. She must have been good at some other things because she got married to one of the local farmer boys the week after graduating from high school. Her rented robe covered the rounded belly from her coming firstborn. I did morning and evening chores as well as most of the field work since I was the boy in the family. It was my responsibility to do any repairs on equipment as well as our pickup and the family car. Our car was a very good running antique 1946 Chevrolet 4-door. The only times it was driven was to church on Sunday and the grocery store on Saturday. It was also my job to keep the leeings from the stills going down the deep well Gramps had dug. The well would almost fill up and you could smell it if you were within 20 to 30 feet, if we had an exceptionally good year. Gramps would have me shoot a couple of varmints, such as groundhogs, and put them around the covered well, so the dead animal smell would overwhelm anyone who walked nearby when that happened. That brings this tale around to hunting. Grandpa had a good double-barreled shotgun and a 30-30 lever action rifle that did everything he needed to do. He also had a long-barreled Colt 45 revolver that he would go out and shoot targets with. He said that he hoped he would never need it. He also had a Colt 1911 automatic that he said was a great gun, but he wasn't a good shot with it. Grandpa took me to the Western Auto Store in town when I was 10. He bought me a used new-style 22 semi-automatic rifle that would shoot 22 shorts, all the way to long rifle rounds. This rifle was supposed to be superior to others because you could shoot the inexpensive shorts without it jamming. You could buy what was called a brick of shorts, 500 rounds for $5. Gramps paid $39 for the rifle with 2 bricks of shorts and a box 50 rounds of long rifle cartridges. I didn't get to use the rifle right away because Grandpa kept taking me out and teaching me where to shoot and when not to shoot. He emphasized how the round could carry for a mile and could hit someone or a farm animal. I was always supposed to be aware of where I was shooting. We went out with me carrying the unloaded rifle, and he would point and say rabbit, squirrel, and even deer to see what I would do. I would look to see where I was going to shoot as I would raise the rifle. I'd lower the gun if it was at a rock bluff. I wouldn't shoot if it was at an open area with no knowledge what was beyond. I'd raise the rifle and say bang if it was toward the ground. It was September before I was sent out with a rifle magazine full of 22 shorts. My goal was to bring back at least one squirrel or rabbit. My exciting 2 hours resulted in firing my new rifle 3 times and bringing a rabbit and 2 squirrels home. Grandpa took all the unfired shells from the rifle and counted them. Grandma took the clean game and began preparing it for supper. I had passed Grandpa's test. I didn't ask for anything special that Christmas because I felt like I had received the best gift for my birthday. Grandpa waited until everyone had opened the couple of presents of clothes that were given. I had made Grandma some kitchen spoons because I had noticed the ones she had were becoming nicked and looked cracked. I found some good oak and carved out 6 kitchen spoons that were every bit as nice as you could get in a store. Grandpa showed me how to smooth out the spoon and handle. I made Grandpa a belt from one of the deer hides I had tanned. My sister was always easy because she loved rabbit slippers. I would use a couple of rabbits and sew the hides into slippers. Grandpa disappeared and came out of the back bedroom with a used single-shot point .410 shotgun. He told me that I had shown him I was ready to hunt for the family. He also told me, "You're going to bring in your first deer this winter. It will take 2 deer to take us through spring, when the steer we have will be ready to butcher." Grandma said, "I'll make you a shirt from the deer hides, like your grandpa wears all the time." I used the 3030 to shoot my first deer the winter before my 11th birthday. It was very cold, and I knew that I had to get this over 200-pound deer home after I got over the excitement of the kill. I cleaned out what seemed like 30 pounds of guts and saved as much of the stomach and skin of the intestines as possible. There's no way I could carry over 100 pounds of deer. So I thought about it in the near 0-degree weather. I found a couple of small trees that I could break off and made a travois. I dragged that carcass over a mile back to the house. Gramps came out with some more knives when it was hung up to skin, and we made short work of skinning the deer and stretching the hide. He picked out a couple of pieces of meat to take inside and had me put everything else into the smokehouse. I was frozen by this time, but even my sister helped celebrate that I had brought home food for our table. I had a cup of coffee, and Grandpa poured me a finger of his good stuff and told me it would warm my insides. That stuff lit a fire all the way down. I'm still not sure whether it warmed me up or I didn't care whether or not I was still cold anymore. It didn't make a difference. I still had to do chores that night and to cut up a bunch of stove wood. I began trapping that winter. Grandpa bought a couple of dozen traps for $1 apiece at a farm auction, and then taught me all the ways to stake them down and how to camouflage and bait them. He walked with me on a 2-mile circuit that included areas where we might catch an elusive mink or weasel. We might catch a fox because there were a lot of them in the area. I would leave the house at 4:30 in the morning and walk my trap line. I often had to use my .22 to kill what was in a trap. Getting the traps reset and the game skinned took a lot of time. I still had to do barn chores, but my sister would do the milking and clean up for me. I made almost $200 from raw skins I caught that winter. I gave Sis $60 because she helped me by doing a lot of my barn chores. I still had to study after supper at night, and it was often difficult to keep my eyes open. I would take my books into the kitchen and do my homework, as Granddad would be reading an old newspaper, and Grandma would be cutting up some of the game I had trapped. We ate any meat there was on the critter, even though it took a lot of her cooking skill to disguise the jive flavor of the foxes and weasels. Deer and other mostly plant-eating critters tasted a lot better. I had over $2,000 saved by the time I was 15. I spent money on presents for birthdays and Christmas and did as Granddad said to do, and donated at least 1/10 to the church. I had bought a couple of steer calves at an auction and was raising them as meat for us. But Grandpa said I could get big bucks for them at the market. We argued over it until we agreed to sell one and eat the other in payment for any grain or hay I used. The animal we sold brought me a hell of a lot of money. I used the money to buy another 3 bull calves that would become food and money when they were grown. Granddad was teaching me how to be a farmer. Well, Sis got married to a farm boy without a farm and a dad who was happy to get rid of him. The boy, or I suppose a man now with a kid, tried working for different people in town, but the jobs just didn't last long. He was said to be a good worker, but he couldn't get onto a place like the grain elevator where he could work all year. Grandpa had them move into Sis' room, which was next to mine. The plan was for them to use those 2 rooms while I slept on the couch until we could build an extra room. Eventually, Grandpa agreed to install a propane tank. We moved the wood stove to the new summer kitchen where the pantry was, and added a gas stove along with a new gas heating system for the house. It was quite a mess. We had to tear up ceilings and floors to install the ducts. I didn't understand why we needed to put ducts everywhere when we had a fireplace in the living room and a wood stove that heated the entire house. We just added an extra blanket when it got cold. We added a new room for me and installed proper wiring for lights and outlets while we were renovating. Grandpa even went to the city and bought a 19-inch TV. We had to put up an antenna on the roof, but we could get signals from Cape Girardeau, Springfield, and Faggville, Arkansas. I had just graduated from high school and was looking for a paying job alongside working on the farm when we were notified that Dad had been killed the day before the ceasefire. A couple of men from Fort Leonard came to the farm to inform us. I felt a deep loss, but he hadn't been home for almost 4 years at that point, and we had only just come to realize that our absent father wasn't ever coming back. Granddad got his shoebox full of important documents out and gave me a letter and 3 life insurance policies. The letter was from Dad, who had written it not that long ago. He had sent it to Granddad to give to me in case he was killed. I sat there staring at the envelope within the envelope that had "Gift to Bernie" written on the front. My eyes teared up, knowing that I would never feel that man's arms hold me, the way they did when he came home and before he left again. I wouldn't see the pain in his eyes for losing the person whom he loved as no other. Dear Bernie, you already know that I'm gone. I'm with your mom now, and please know that the 2 of us happily look down on you and your sister. I'm writing to you because you're the one who will take care of the family. I have the 3 life insurance policies that are to be used in a special way. First is to make sure that your sister, her husband, and baby are taken care of. Second, make sure your grandparents are taken care of for the rest of their lives. Third, I want you to go to a university and get a college degree to support your family for the rest of their lives. I know you are probably figuring on farming that God-forsaken farm and imitating your grandfather. That's probably not a bad idea, but I want you to be more than that. I want my son to become someone to look up to. I'd bet you still don't have a girlfriend and aren't really hunting for one by the time you get this letter. You were always the practical kid, so I know that you're waiting for the right one to come along. Go to college. Your grades in school were always at the top of your class? I'm sure you'll figure out a way for someone to help your grandpa. I love you as I love your sister and my mom and dad. Son, I ask you to find a way to excel in your life with a little help from your dad. Your dad, Jack Daniel Beck. Grandpa was watching me read the letter and saw the big tears run down my cheeks. He reached across and patted my hand. You still have the love of a son for his father. He wasn't here with you as he could have been, but you still knew him as your dad. You never knew a mother other than your grandmother. I think she has savored raising you and your sister. The man had 2 glasses of his best with a couple of fingers in each, and as he picked up his glass said, To your father, my son, who died in the defense of his country. I picked up my glass, clinked it to his, and drank the dark killer liquid down. I looked at the letter again and handed it to Grandpa. He read it, folded it up, put it back in the envelope, and said, You have your orders. Figure out how you're going to do as he told you. Grandpa got up from the table and left. Grandma was still in the kitchen and put a couple of cookies on a plate for me. She poured another few fingers of Grandpa's best in the glass and sat beside me. My grandmother leaned her head against my shoulder and said, We will all miss your dad. He thought he was doing right to support his wife and the baby that was coming. Losing your mother was more than he could handle. It's time for you to take charge of your family now. We will support whatever decisions you make. The woman with a permanent smile picked up the glass she had poured for me and almost drained it, leaving a little less than a finger of the good stuff. My grandmother gave me a kiss and left me with the envelopes and life insurance policies. One was for $20,000, another for $50,000, and the last one was for $100,000. I looked at all the endorsements and saw that Dad had been paying for these by allotments from his military pay. It might take a while to get everything taken care of, but I considered where I was and what needed to be done. Sis's husband, Bryce, was becoming a decent hand on the farm, so I needed to show him what to do all year long. He loved the idea that Grandpa and I would show him how to do everything. The man was willing to learn, and we taught him something new every day. He understood that we would sell 2 and keep 1 for the family when the beef stock was ready to sell. We'd use the money to buy more calves and repeat the process. He could continue with the pigs we had or get rid of them. But then we wouldn't have the bacon, sausage, or hams. I think that he decided to keep the pigs. I taught Bryce to trap the same as I had been doing. He loved the idea of being able to trap and skin the animals that would bring money to the family. He was a solid, moral family man who delighted in his son and was excited that his wife, my sister, was pregnant again. His dad wasn't a very nice person. He would come over and grunt a greeting while Bryce's mother would be all over SES and the baby. I took Sissy's man out when I found out that he had never fired a gun, and we practiced until I was confident that he wouldn't kill himself or someone else. He was able to bring a few handfuls of quail back for a good dinner. He began bringing rabbits and even a duck home. The guy was a sponge when it came to learning how to farm and hunt. I had ridden to Southeast Missouri State to see what it would take to get into school. I told them that I wanted to study law. They wrote back for me to apply at the University of Missouri in Columbia. That was farther away than I wanted to be. I knew that it would take more than the usual 4 years to get a law degree. This was going to require some thought. I went to town and talked to the local attorney, James Barker. He did all the legal work for people in the county. The county state's attorney was Jack Fornson, who was probably older than Grandpa. Both attorneys were excited that I wanted to become a lawyer. Jack said that his job would be open soon as he really needed to retire. James said that he always had enough business to keep another attorney busy. He said that he handled a lot of illegal alcohol transport cases that kept his bills paid. I wrote to the University of Missouri and was requested to come to Columbia for an interview. This trip required that I drive a decent vehicle, so I drove the '46 Chevy sedan. I brought my high school transcript and letters of recommendation from my teachers. I was dressed in my Sunday best with shine shoes and a fresh haircut. My enthusiasm kept people smiling, but I also knew they could see hayseed in me. The two people talking to me wanted to know what my family income was during the interview. I was stumped because I had helped Gramps do his taxes the last 3 years. But we didn't pay any taxes because we didn't make much money. I told the people that we didn't make enough money to pay taxes, but I know that we made almost $2,000 on sugar and beef the past year. The man asked, "How are you going to pay to go to school?" My dad had insurance policies that he left for me to go to school. He was killed in Iraq at the end of Desert Storm. He left a letter asking me to attend college, so here I am. The woman said, "You are probably eligible for some state and federal help. Your SAT scores are very high and would entitle you to state scholarships if you had applied. Let us help you fill out your application to attend school after you complete a psychological test battery. I want to see where you stand with others within your age group." That took all afternoon. The questions were mostly stupid and asked the same thing in several different ways. I can't imagine how the answers to the questions were going to give anyone any insight to me and my ability to go to school. Another test was a general knowledge test that was probably meant for 5th grade kids. I did all the math and quickly answered the questions. I was now very hungry and asked about a cafe that might be nearby so I could buy something to eat. The counselor looked up at me and said, "I'm sorry, we didn't offer you a cafeteria pass. You'll have to wait until the evening meal is ready." I told her, "You're not going to finish checking all those answers in an hour, so tell me where I can get something to eat." The woman was aggravated at me and said, "There is a pizza place just outside the gate you just drove in. You can get a sandwich as well as pizza there." I didn't know whether I'd like pizza, so I walked to the little place and had a fat Italian beef sandwich. They didn't have milk, but they had iced tea. I had that and walked back to the university offices. The woman was still checking answers. She looked up at me and asked, "Have you taken these tests before?" "No, ma'am. I've not seen a bunch of questions like that before. They keep asking you the same thing, but in a different manner." "I suppose it's to see if you're consistent with your answers." The woman looked at me for a long time and then finished reviewing the tests. She left and came back with the man who had been in the earlier interview. The man said, "Would you mind if I orally asked a battery of questions in a very fast manner?" "These questions are easy and you shouldn't have any problem. I'll ask you a couple of math questions. So here's a pad and pencil to do any figuring you might need to do." The two fired questions at me that were similar to those on the questionnaire I had answered. The math questions were all simple, and any of the kids I went to school with could have answered them. I asked, How do you do this with every potential student who asks for admittance? As soon as we were done, don't you have hundreds of people to interview? The woman said, you're among very few who are applying after they have left high school for more than a year. I can only guess that you have been a major help on the farm. How are those you're leaving going to handle you not being there? I gritted my teeth and said, my sister and her husband moved in with their baby. My sister's husband is a good guy and is working hard to take up the slack of what I always did. We all talked about it and think this will work. Dad wanted me to go to school, so here I am. The man said, we'll have to get confirmation, but we're recommending that you be given a full scholarship that includes housing and food through law school. You'll have to pass the LSAT, the law school admission test, but you should do fine if you do well in your undergraduate degree program. Do you have a plan for after you finish law school and take your bar exam? I want to go back home and practice law with the people I know. The state's attorney is going to retire, so that job might be open. I know I'll make a living practicing law there. The woman said, you have a very humble approach to life, Mr. Beck. I'm sure you'll succeed. I filled out a lot more papers and handwrote a short story in which they wanted me to describe why I wanted to become a lawyer and what I was willing to do to accomplish that goal. I was careful to spell everything correctly and to use the proper sentence structure and punctuation as I was writing. I handed it all to the woman who was sitting at a desk just outside the conference room. She told me that I would receive a formal letter of my acceptance within a week. She told me that I should be prepared to spend quite a bit of money for books as the scholarship didn't cover that. She said that the university would help me find a position if I needed a part-time job to help with my everyday expenses. I walked out to the car with a big handful of papers. I was still hungry, but it was already near 5. I wanted to get on the road since it was 200 meters to home. I had left home at 5 this morning, so I was getting tired in addition to being hungry. I began going through Columbia and stopped at a McDonald's. I looked at their menu and decided on 3 of their hamburgers, an order of fries, and a large Coke. I figured that should last me, and it did. It took 4 hours to drive home, but it was worth it to go home and not stay at a hotel. Everyone was getting ready for bed, so we all agreed that I would tell them everything in the morning. I was sitting in the kitchen trying to unwind and eating a cookie when Granddad came out and poured me about 3 fingers of his best. He said that he got that way when he had to drive a long distance. He patted me on the back and left to go to bed. I heard my sis and her man doing what married folks do and wondered if it was as good when she was pregnant. The love was still there, and it might even be magnified. I envied the 2 of them for having found that love. I sipped the liquor, thinking that I wanted that kind of relationship, but I really didn't know any girls I liked that much. There were some from my high school class that were unmarried, but most of them looked down on us country people. I knew I'd marry my sister if that had been available. I'd marry any one of my cousins, but they were all happily married farmers' wives. I wonder why I was so picky. Some of the younger girls at church would give me sweet smiles, but they were still in school and too young. There were just a couple of girls who weren't married who regularly went to church, but they didn't seem to want attention from guys. I was sure that I would meet a lot of new people when I went to college. The family sat at the table after chores and breakfast the next morning, while I told about the day before. I showed everyone all the pieces of paper they gave me, and then the final brief letter that said that I would be given an invitation to attend their school at the state's expense. We talked about the cost of going to school, and SIS listed all the things I would need. The big expense was at the end, a vehicle. Granddad told me, we'll go see that knob thief in town to see if he has something. We need to ask around first, though, in case someone has something they aren't using. You know how to keep a car running, so you can get an older model. You still have all your savings from trapping and beef money. I'm sure that you have enough to do what you need. Besides that, you have your dad's money that you might not need for school. Everyone already knew I was going to the University of Missouri in Columbia at church on Sunday. I think every person in the church came up to congratulate me after the final song and prayer. The word was out that I needed a car, and it was a little white-haired old lady who came up to me and said, you know that my man passed a couple of months ago. I know you do because you were at the funeral. He had that fairly new truck that would be good transportation for you to go back and forth to school. I want you to have it, and you can do some things for me. Come over this afternoon and we'll talk about it. Granddad drove me over to Mrs. Snyder's place and went in with me. The woman was typical and offered us coffee, milk, or water, along with cookies that I'm sure she made special because I was coming. She sat us down and took hold of my hand. "You're so much like your father. My Judy and your father were sort of sweet on each other. And then that killer tornado came through here and she ran out in it. They found her body down in Arkansas. I think those two would have been a good couple. Your dad became sweet on your mom and they married. But times were bad then and he went off to the service to be able to send money home. Your sister came along. Then you and finally the child that killed her. You were lucky to have your grandparents. I just love Happy to death. She helps everyone and has been sending you to those who need help all your life. Let me help you." The woman said, "You know that I have a few animals that need to go somewhere. So I want you to take them home and care for them. You might want to share the meat from the beef with me, but I don't eat much. I have chickens, and that means I always have extra eggs. You need to come by and get them. We'll eventually have enough chicken dinners to get rid of them. I'll need help getting sacks of grain from the barn to the chicken house. Meanwhile, there's going to be some things that will need fixing from time to time. You can do that too. All in all, I think this will be good for you and your family." I smiled at the woman and said, "You know that I'm going off to school and won't be here most of the time to do these things for you, Mrs. Snyder. Would it be good if Bryce, my sister's husband, came by to do them?" "Of course, Bernie, these are just some things that need doing. But you have to come to see me and we'll have some of my man's sipping stuff when you're home for holidays. I'll always remember your father by looking at you." The beautiful old white-haired lady pulled out a drawer in the kitchen and gave me the title to the truck along with all the papers that had come with it when it was purchased. She sat down with a piece of paper and wrote out that she was giving the truck to me for the price of $1. She was smiling as she said, "That'll get that greedy tax collector, Simon, all pissed off that he can't collect some extra tax money. Be sure to go buy insurance for the truck and remember to come over and collect the animals so that I don't have to worry about feeding them." Grandpa wanted to go look at the stock, and we found a cow with a young calf and 2 steers that were past time to either butcher or ship. Mrs. Snyder said, "I'll miss my cow, but she needs to be gone. I can't go anywhere because I don't have anyone to come to milk her. I might come over in the morning or evening and milk her sometimes. It's sad to have a farm without any farm animals." I told this woman, "I'll milk her for you tonight and tomorrow morning, and we'll get the stock moved tomorrow. I'll make sure you get as much milk as you need. Just tell Bryce and he'll do what you want. I'll make sure that he visits with you often so that you can tell him of any chores he might need to do. I'll be by to see you and have some of your cookies when I'm home from school." I drove the fairly new truck home, noting it only had 12,000 miles. It didn't make sense for a farmer's truck, but he had a cap on it. It was obviously waterproof as there was no moisture in the bed. I was thinking of pulling the cap off, but it would be good to have a dry place to haul my clothes and anything else I needed to take to school. Bryce and I had a long talk about what he needed to do for Mrs. Sander. He understood that she was giving us a lot of food and the cow would be good for his kids. He said that he needed to find some pasteurizing equipment, but I sort of ignored that. That might be too much for us out in the boonies. Monday was busy because I needed to get the vehicle registered and insured. I actually had to insure it before registering it. The insurance wasn't that much since it was through the Farm Bureau. The state registration was almost as much, but it was a one-time fee with annual renewal. Bryce and I moved the stock from Mrs. Snyder's barnyard to ours. I used her tractor and manure spreader to clean her barn area where the stock had been and spread the manure in the fields. I spread some straw in the pens and the loafing shed where the animals normally stayed at night. I cleaned her chicken house and spread the chicken manure on the garden area. It would need plowing and dissing again before planting, but some of the chores were done for her. The sweet lady always wanted to spend some extra time with me before I went home. We sat at her kitchen table and sipped some of her deceased husband's special liquor. I made her supper a couple of times so that I knew she would eat after drinking a glass of the special stuff. I brought her to the house to visit with Happy Sis and her babies. I was ready to begin school in the middle of the school year, January. I was to arrive and sign in at the dorm by 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the Saturday before the school semester began. I arrived on Thursday so that I could make sure my registration was correct, and I had all the books I would need. I had everything I needed for my room and discovered that I shared a room with someone since I was a freshman or sophomore. I bought all the books listed on the papers I was given. and used a campus map to check all the buildings, and then made a route to the buildings in the order I would be going to them. I felt ready. The cafeteria wasn't bad. The food was decent, and you could get your fill. There were several cafeterias around campus, but the one closest to my dorm was a good one. I was reading a poli-sci text when my roommate showed up. He had been in school since August and felt he knew everything that was important. He lectured me the entire time. He brought his junk in and had it spread throughout the room. I asked him, "Can I help you get your personal stuff in your closet or under your bed?" He jumped up and stood over me as I sat on my bunk. "I'll put my wherever I want, and I don't want to hear anything else from you. Now get the hell out of here while I use this room the way I want." I stood and noted he was at least 4 inches taller than me and was probably 50 pounds heavier. I nicely said, "Just so we understand each other. We're roommates, and that means half of the room is yours and half of the room is mine. Stay on your half, and we'll be fine." The guy was stupid and rushed me with his arms spread like some idiot on the wrestling shows on TV.